Welcome. I'm Liz Taylor, ocean explorer, naturalist, and entrepreneur.
And I'm Sylvia Earle. I'm an oceanographer, National Geographic explorer, founder of Mission Blue, and I'm an ocean elder. Thank you, ocean elders, for sponsoring this program.
Absolutely. And this is our show Dive In, where we host informal and open conversations with the ocean community on topics of wonder and interest. We're glad to be here and hope everyone has made some time to get outside. You can ask questions by putting them into the Q&A box, and we'll get to as many as we can towards the end of the hour. And before we get going, let's remind everyone that the world
Is
blue.
blue.
Today, we are very excited to have David Helvarg joining us. He's an author and executive director of Blue Frontier and Ocean Policy Group. He also hosts the Rising Tide podcast, which Sylvia and I have had the pleasure of participating in.
Yes, we have.
And he's co-founder of the Peter Benchley Awards and a senior fellow with the Center for the Blue Economy. Welcome, David.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Sylvia.
Ahoy.
Ahoy. I'm going to do the
Arg.
I'm going to do the frightening thing of attempting to share my screen. But, oh my God, here we go. Here we are.
Almost there.
Almost there.
And
Oh, we started the wrong one.
that's a great one, though.
Oh, we're going to go back.
The seal of our friendship. The seal of our
Yes,
friendship.
seal of approval. But almost there.
Mhm.
All right. So your training as a journalist has taken you on some fairly hair-raising assignments. War correspondent in Northern Ireland, Central American conflicts, and back to California. It's quite the wild beginnings. But how did you become ocean focused?
Well, unlike you, I haven't had my whole life focused on the other 71% of our planet. I actually got distracted for about 30 or 40 years and lived the schizophrenic life of going off to cover wars and politics and epidemics so I could go home and body surf. As a kid, before I wanted to be an oceanographer, like when I was 10, I'd look up at the sky and kind of be a little resentful that I felt like I was a generation too soon to visit alien worlds. And then when my mom took my sister and me down to the Florida Keys when I was 15, looking out from that roadway and that turquoise water and feeling like I'd come home to a place I'd never been before.
Mm.
And I got a mask and snorkel that week and got off the seawall, and suddenly there's like this living rocks and color and shoaling fish and my first little baby hammerhead. And I realized whole alien world right off the seawall there.
Yeah.
It's
So
incredible.
that was my plan then. I was going to grow up and, be an oceanographer. And, I'd already been watching Sea Hunt, Lloyd Bridges as underwater investigator, Mike Nelson. So eventually I did become, a diver and a private investigator like Mike. But I got distracted by the 60s, the movements, the moments of my youth. And I ended up being a journalist in Northern Ireland where I quickly discovered that the old saying, in war, truth's the first casualty. My sympathies didn't matter. Everyone was not only willing but delighted to lie to me. So I had to investigate, get beyond the car bombs and the shootouts to figure out what was really going on. And that sort of got me into reporting, which has always been my career in a sense. It's just that
Mhm.
after years of doing reporting and always looking for ocean connected stories, whether it was covering the Navy in San Diego and it's, going out on aircraft carriers, reporting on its killer dolphins, its trained marine mammal program, or offshore oil, whatever it was that could take me out there. But basically, still doing, a lot of war, a lot of conflict.
Mhm.
And eventually, I was up here in the San Francisco Bay Area working for KQED public TV and doing documentaries. And one I did with a colleague, Steve Talbot, was called Who Bombed Judy Barry. It's about a Earth First activist who somebody put a pipe bomb in her car.
Oh dear.
and she was mauled, and the FBI wanted to blame it on her. Eventually, we showed in our documentary she was a victim, not the perpetrator. Um, and that got me to write a book on the environmental backlash of that period of the 1990s, the war against the Greens, which, after some time, allowed me to write the book I'd always wanted to write, Blue Frontier,
Hmm.
about America's oceans and the possibilities and the challenges. And that book came out right at the time when I lost my partner. Um, she had died young of cancer, and I knew that George Bush was ginning up to invade, George Bush Jr., to invade Iraq again. And I knew that war was a good antidote to depression. So I thought I'd go back to war. And Ralph Nader called me out of the blue. He'd read the last chapter of Blue Frontier, which is titled The Seaweed Rebellion. It's about
Mm.
marine grassroots activists all over who are doing the right things, but we need to scale up their solutions to be effective. And he asked if anyone was networking with them, and you know, anyway, I finally decided we're always going to have wars. We're not always going to have healthy coral reefs or kelp forests or the abundance of life that entangles us all and that we all depend on. So that plus I'd inherited the cat. Didn't know what to do with the cat if I went off to war. So
That's right.
the poos who didn't even like getting her paws wet sort of brought me back to the ocean, and
That's
that's
excellent.
22 years ago. And mixed feelings, but no real regrets. I've had the opportunity to cover what I think is the greatest conflict the world's facing today, which is the unraveling of our, network of life, most of which is wet and salty.
Absolutely.
But
Gotten to,
David,
do a
I, th-
lot.
I think you clearly are doing what what scientists basically do, observing carefully and reporting honestly what you see. And it's what makes a scientist, what makes a really competent journalist a competent journalist. And you really shine in terms of your dedication to doing just that, observing carefully and then reporting as honestly as you know how what you see and what's there to be seen.
Hmm.
And if we could all just get that as a primary goal, just speak the truth. Don't be afraid, and you aren't. Bravo for
Well,
sticking out.
yeah, I don't quite believe in speaking truth to power because power doesn't listen. So, what you have to do is tell stories that connect with people who can
Yeah, speak
make a
to the people.
difference.
Yeah,
And a lot of what we've tried to do with Blue Frontiers is kind of provide networking opportunities for people who do care about the ocean to make a difference, to be able to, saltwater is a great way to kind of erode stovepipes.
That's
And
true.
and I think that a lot like people in the maritime community aren't familiar with the marine conservation community, and people who are, in the Navy may, but I find that there's incredible overlap. I mean, I've been on the bridge of an aircraft carrier and discovered that, that the air boss is also a member of Surf Rider, it's environmental surfers. And, I've been out in ports, and you find that, you know, the port director for Maersk in the LA Long Beach complex, the largest port complex in the Western Hemisphere, studied oceanography. That was major in college, and,
Amazing.
fascinated by fishes. And, you know, I mean, there's so few of us in a way. You figure there are 8 billion people on this planet, and almost all of them are on that, 29% that's terrestrial with our two-legged air-breathing biases. And then on any given day, there are just about 30 million of us out on the other 71% of the planet that's salty and that contains most of our life. And so the challenge, which Sylvia is very good at, is, and you're very good at creating the tools to get there, but to communicate what that tiny proportion of humanity that actually experiences that goes on and under the ocean, um,
Yeah.
what we're seeing and how vital it is to all of us. It's the crucible of life and the driver of, climate and weather and everything. Well, I mean, I'm preaching to the head of the choir here.
Yeah. But tell us how the Benchley Awards came about. You were co-founder there, yes?
Yeah. So we had, as I say, first thought was creating more networks. So we created um, a citizen's guide to ocean conservation, basically identified about 1,200 groups working on coastal and ocean causes, primarily in the U.S., and thought, well, it'd be nice to bring them all together. So we had our first Blue Vision Summit in D.C. Over time, we'd have 8 of these summits where we'd bring thousands of people to D.C. to meet admirals and senators and the people who made policy. And also, when you bring people up on Capitol Hill and these congressional delegation from Colorado, Iowa suddenly was confronted with, young people who've come there on their own dime and their own time to talk about the ocean, it has impacts. And that our very first Blue Vision Summit in 2004, I asked Peter Benchley to be our keynoter because I knew that while he wrote Jaws, he'd committed his life to ocean conservation, protecting sharks after the
Eating the
impact.
sharks, yeah.
Mhm.
And as did his wife and partner Wendy. And so yeah, I was getting to be friends. I really liked him, and then he passed away. And then I approached Wendy. We'd started an awards program. I said, let's expand these awards you know, into something that would honor Peter's memory and at the same time create a network and show what leadership can do. I mean, we're always looking to create solutions larger than the problems we're confronting. And now every year we bring 8 people from youth activists to heads of state who are really turning the course and changing the current in ways that, especially these last 2 years when we had the Peter Benchley Ocean Awards for 10 years, it went into abeyance, and then the Aquarium Conservation Partnership stepped forward to do the
Yeah.
logistics and fundraising that Wendy and I were really burned out on. And, these last 2 years, particularly to see people who are having real impact. I gave the media award this year to David Attenborough and his Ocean series,
Right.
um, particularly when what we're seeing in the U.S. is a turning away from science and ocean protection. Remembering the world still keeps moving forward, and there are good people in the world who are still making a difference. Um, we used to call it agitprop, uh,
Hmm.
that you got to reinforce yourselves to keep going, and you have to, reconnect with the joy that is. Somebody once wrote a review in the New Yorker, one of my books, and saying 3 books that were all memoirs about the ocean, and the writer complained that she didn't like that all 3 books ended on some note of optimism, and I wrote a letter saying, I'm sorry, it's just every time I, come out from a body surfing session or a dive, I'm optimistic. It's
Yeah,
optimism of the will.
that's right. The
And
connectivity of water.
When Peter Benchley wrote Jaws, he certainly did not intend to drive people out of the ocean or even out of the shower. They were afraid to touch water for a while. But once that had happened, I mean, he wasn't opposed to the wonderful revenue that came as a consequence of the book and the film, but he has used, and so has Wendy, um, they have used their influence to turn things from being afraid of the ocean to embrace the ocean with care.
right. And there's a whole generation of biologists I run into. I mean, like I'm an ocean elder enough to have been inspired by like sea hunt. But there's
Hmm.
a whole other generation that was inspired in the 70s by um, Richard Dreyfuss's character, the
Oh,
marine
yeah.
biologist who's more fascinated than
The
afraid of
innocent marine
big
Yeah,
fish
biologist.
with fins.
yeah. That was a
True.
great character. And I love the alliance that you've made with the various aquariums around the country. I
Yes.
think it's a great way to get more people to understand the role that they play in marine conservation as well.
And it's a real change. I mean, and I was certainly inspired as a kid. My dad takes me to the New York Aquarium, and you see a beluga whale, or they pet the electric eel, and you hear the crackling. But back then, aquariums were basically medium security fish jails.
Sure.
And I think they've evolved now where, when we in 2018, we organized a global March for the Ocean. Sylvia was there in DC, and the next year I got to join the march at the second annual march at the New York Aquarium on Coney Island, and they were involved in all sorts of activities for ocean protection. I mean, the National Aquarium in Baltimore has a floating wetlands,
Yes,
Yeah.
beautiful.
and so
Beautiful.
many. I mean, I was just in Monterey, which is Monterey Bay Aquarium is one of the leaders of sort of a global effort to educate people around sustainable seafood. They claim you don't.
Yes.
But also
We-
plastic pollution. I'm trying to connect them. We're starting a kelp education and learning project. We hope that, as aquariums have educated people around corals, they can start to educate people around the other great marine ecosystem, which is the kelp forest, which of course is the topic of my new seventh book. Six of them are
Yeah.
in the ocean,
And
Forest of the
yeah,
Sea.
and we have quite a long list of books here that we can recommend to our diving community for their summer reading. So we've
Oh
got the
yeah.
Book on Shore
Here's
and this
my other
one.
five.
Yeah, here's
Other
50.
five ocean books. I started with political, and it's all in a way it's all political because, when I wrote 50 ways to save the ocean, one of my
Uh-huh.
last ways is vote the ocean,
Exactly.
you know.
And there you are, hard at work. One of the ways that is coming increasingly clear is the choice of what we choose to eat. And what we once thought could be the sustainable extraction of wildlife for the marketplace is now that about half of the life in the sea has already been extracted from the whales and tunas and swordfish and shrimp and squid, you name it. We really have to change our ways. We're part of the problem when we choose wildlife, whether it's from the land or the sea,
Right.
during
And
the
you'd think,
21st century. It's a new world.
yeah, you think we learned from the old world in the last century that market hunting doesn't work, that you just
Hmm.
exterminate the buffalo and the geese and all these species. And in a way, it's sort of I mean, what's interesting, we had the agricultural revolution 10,000 years ago, which has its, benefits and downsides. We've gone from 6 trillion to 3 trillion trees on the planet as we've cleared forest for agriculture. But today, over half of our seafood is now farmed, not wild
But they take
captured.
wild fish to feed to the cultivated fish, which is not a good business model.
Yeah.
No, I think it's it's like every new industry starts dirty. And so we've had, particularly in the last 30 years, we've had this model of aquaculture, which is, you know, grab the predator fish, feed them all the small fish that you pull out of the forage fish out of the ocean. And that's, as you say, not sustainable. But today, of the 130 million tons of aquacultured seafood, 40 million tons is seaweeds.
Hmm.
And, and then when I was working on the book in Maine, I was visiting a mussel farmer, and he was talking about how mussels are, intense protein. They hang together and they're less carbon intensive than growing soybeans. And I go, well, what are your challenges? He goes, well, there's regulatory and there's technical and there's predators. And
Oh my God.
And you're
I go,
displacing natural systems when you raise anything in the sea.
It's true.
yeah, but I had no idea what a predator of mussels was. He says ducks, and I tried to cover my
Ducks.
mouth so I didn't laugh. Apparently,
And you
eider
start,
ducks swarm by
Yeah.
the hundreds and thousands and dive down and eat the mussels, and you need a
Wow.
lot of netting.
hey,
That's crazy. I mean, I could see, octopus maybe some
starfish.
sea stars, yeah, things like that.
Yeah,
But
no, it's
ducks, I mean,
the eider
honestly.
ducks is so
Clever
I guess they're
creature.
not, what do they call them? Meta predators, those that are sort of in the middle of the pile up. But when I was there in Maine, that was in Maine, I was also for the book going out with Bob and Dave, who,
Mhm.
Bob's a lobsterman, and he's growing 65,000 pounds of sugar kelp this past year, and he's hoping to grow 100,000 pounds this year because he sees the the lobster are being impacted by the changing ocean. It's warming up, and so the lobster heading out to sea or up north to Canada. He's got a friend, he says, who's a better fisherman than him. Up, he says, his friend's down east, which means up north there.
That's right. Yeah.
And he says, but for the last 20 years, I was out catching him, and now he's catching more bugs than I am. And it's 85 degrees today, and it's the first time in my life here I've had to buy an air conditioner.
Wow.
So
Incredible.
it's and people, I don't know why, but again, I guess it's we're doing our best, and certainly there's a lot of inspiration from the work you guys, you gals are doing, but people don't know. They don't know that 90% of the heat from burning fossil fuels is being absorbed in the ocean, that a third of the
Hmm.
carbon dioxide is being buffered into carbonic acid and making it harder for all the shell forming critters to survive. And the heat is really, people at least know coral reefs. They know, and most people I think may know they're in trouble. They don't know why. They don't know it's the heat and the bleaching, but nobody sort of knows. I mean, this is why I wrote my last book. Nobody knows that much about kelp forest, and I quote Sylvia in the book, saying, I say, why not? It's like, well, it's warm in the coral, and people like being comfortable, and it's also a lot easier to photograph. They like low nutrients. It's always clear and warm and pretty. But the thing is, you can't touch anything. All these
Yeah.
little animals that are so sensitive, and kelp diving's like a full contact sport, you
Yeah, it
know.
kind of wants to wrap around you and I know there's many different kinds of kelp, but I've never heard of a sugar kelp.
It's a kind of lemon area.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's big in the East Coast, and actually the natural sugar kelp forest in the southern Maine have sort of gone away and been displaced by turf algae, but
Turf algae.
you
Yeah.
know, little Philomoneous, what do you call it?
Look at this
Philomoneous,
great photo. Huh?
less
Well,
productive algae, and but and I tasted it, and it's I'll stick with my West Coast bull kelp.
But
Call
yeah.
me parochial, but it just tasted like lawn mowing,
Lawn mowing clippings.
lawnmower outflow. Kelp's
Wow.
like crunchy, and bull kelp. It's got
That snap.
that
Yeah.
snap and saltiness that I like. But I do think that I mean I'm hoping between the book and the Sequoias of the Sea documentary that my associate director Natasha Benjamin and her co-director Anna Blanco did, which will be on PBS this fall. Um, and just networking again, that we can create a sort of kelp education learning project. And at least, my aim is at least get people as aware of kelp as they are of coral, which I say in the book, they're kind of like the ebony and ivory of the ocean, big systems. I mean, as you know, corals are these living creatures, little polyps that are living on the skeletons of their ancestors until they form large, massive structures, and they need low nutrient, and algae can overwhelm and smother them, so they need the herbivores, they need the parrotfish and the sea turtles to control the algae. And then you get in kelp. Kelp is an algae, and it's full of, and it needs the cold upwelling nutrients. So most of the time you go in there, it's dark, and then the light breaks through, and they need the predators. They need like the sea otters, the voracious marine weasels, and the big sheephead fish to graze back the predators, the urchins and the abalone. And so, it's really, it's like these, you know, coral reefs are concentrated but incredibly productive. Kelp forests spread out almost over a third of the planet's coastlines, but it's not where people go on vacation for the most part. It's like
Hmm.
the
Yeah.
cold, turbid waters of the world.
So what did it take for you to prepare to go kind of study kelp intensively for the book?
Well, I've been diving on and off for years, and I saw the decline, which is one of the reasons I wanted to do it. Um, but I hadn't been honestly in the kelp for about 6 or 7 years. So my first kind of practice dive down in Monterey, we went in and there was about 1 to 2 foot visibility.
Of
So
course.
basically, it was like diving through an abstract painting, an impressionist painting of browns and blacks, and I just kept reaching out for the fin of the guy in front of me, and then we surfaced right in the middle of the canopy, so I had to remember my kelp crawl to get across. But I know I had to do it, so future dives were very different. I mean, one was smashing urchins in Casper Cove with the former fish and wildlife chief for abalone, and in their attempts to bring it back there. And then I went down to Southern California with Tom Ford, and over the last decade, they've restored 80 acres of kelp.
Hmm.
They've taken out the urchins, and they found that the spore you don't even have to replant. Many places it will naturally, life will, and it's come back. And seeing a healthy kelp forest, and even one of their coves, there was a mudslide um, because it's Palos Verdes and the homes and mud's all sliding there,
Oh yeah.
which is what happens when you build on volcanic ash. But
Yeah.
um, they lost 2 acres, and in 2 years it was back. I mean, this is the bamboo of the ocean. So my friends who do coral restoration, they take a fragment, they slap it on a dead reef, and they get all excited if a branching coral grows 12 inches in a year. Kelp's back 100 feet high in a year. It's amazingly productive, and 1,000 species living in there. Everything from the leafy sea dragons and all the people don't know. I opened the first chapter of the book up in Alaska on a salmon stream because people know salmon are, ocean travelers and river homesteaders, and people
Hmm.
who study them know that they're nutrients that the eagles and bears eat on, or as they die in the upwaters, that it puts all the phosphorus and nitrogen into the tree roots, and trees that grow on salmon rivers grow 3 times as fast. But almost nobody knows that part of their 2 to 7 year life cycles, their first year out of that Power Creek in Cordova, they spend in the kelp. And it's their nursery, and it's where they're eating zooplankton until they're big enough to start eating fish and going out to sea. And it's salmon and cod and herring are all dependent on healthy kelp.
Hmm.
I just wrote a piece for American Indian Magazine on the herring roe on kelp fishery, which is still active in among tribes, among the Tlingit and the Haltsuk in Southeast Alaska and British Columbia, and a lot of the book is about, I mean, there's not, indigenous coastal communities are about the only ones who really have a long history of kelp story and kelp knowledge. And so that's part of the restoration effort, of course, is tapping into the Pomo leader up in Fort Bragg,
Hmm.
which is um, a fishing community that was pretty much devastated by the loss of kelp when it happened. Um, their urchin fishery and the recreational abalone diving that brought 30 million a year
And
crumbled.
others
And
too, starting before the other organisms became targets for taking.
yeah, it was already overfished. It was like the loss of kelp was the last.
Yeah. But
But now it's to see people who were at each other's throats before this loss, the fishermen and the scientists and the environmentalists and the tribes working together, trying to, figure out how to move forward in a I mean, the history of Fort Bragg is basically exploitative, and they're trying to figure out how to live with resources. A leader of the Pomo there said that, talking about the fishermen's opposition to reintroducing the otters,
Oh my God. Yeah.
and he said, the thing is, if you can be on the ocean. That doesn't mean you own the ocean. And I just added, we don't own the ocean. We owe the ocean. It's
Hmm.
giving
but
us so
David,
much.
this is the 21st century. It wasn't long ago.
It's not my favorite.
It wasn't long ago. Like 1800, there were only a billion people.
Yeah.
When I came along, 2 billion. By 1980, there were four. Now there are eight. And
Oh,
it
I
keeps
know.
going up. The size of the planet doesn't change, but the health of the planet, the ability of the planet to tolerate newcomers such as humans, we are newcomers, and
Yep.
we are taking from systems that have been developing and integrating these closely knit systems literally for hundreds of millions of years before humans even existed. And then we come along and we presume that we call it natural resources, free for the taking. And we've taken so much that now we're beginning to pay the cost with changing climate, with a diversity crash, with a world that is no longer as safe as it was when I was a child, let alone the children 1,000 years ago. We have to change. It's not reasonable for us to look at the ocean as if there's a lot of excess stuff out there just waiting for us to take to market.
Turn it to products.
No excess
Money.
left. I mean,
Yeah, turn it to
I
money.
agree. My whole theory of sort of the blue bead is that the only resource not fully exploited in the ocean is good investigative reporting and storytelling. I think, you talk about the kelps, yeah, it's been around for at least 32 million years. And then 6 million years ago, two new species emerged that had huge impact on the kelp. It was, the humanoids and the fish-eating otters.
But
And as I say,
our impact 6 million years ago was Zippo. It
Yeah.
was so
right.
tiny.
Well, I said, but what happened then is one of those species developed into a charismatic, intelligent, tool-using creature, and the other became us.
Yeah.
Very
Right.
true.
And
No, I mean, there's whole stories about, cultures and communities that are connected via the Kelp Highway that used to exist along the West Coast here. And what other continents or countries did you visit in during the kelp research?
well, unfortunately, book advances are not as good as I'd like to have visited a lot of places, but I got around some. I visited, California, Maine, Alaska, Hawaii, Turkey, Taiwan, and Palau, and one or two, and lots of Zoom conversations with folks in Norway and Argentina and elsewhere. I
Hmm.
mean, it's pretty amazing. In Turkey, yeah, people are, they're not going to make the fine distinctions. I'm not pretending to be a phycologist, a seaweed expert, but so in Turkey, I visited a microalgae plant. It's not mega algae. It's not the 30 some odd kelp species. It's the other 12,000,
Hmm.
but it's like the first carbon negative biorefinery in Europe.
Wow,
Uh, this,
interesting.
yeah, this scientist has taken he gets his feeds the algae with carbon dioxide from a cement factory
Oh
instead of
man.
putting it there, and sugars from a fruit drink factory, and he's growing jet fuel for Turkish Airlines. It's subsidized. But once you take the lipids out, he's using it for omega threes, for biostimulants, for soil enhancement. He's got like 8 lines of products that pay for themselves collectively, and he's about to move into a million-ton factory that'll employ 200 some odd people. And he's saying, we're not the only one. I mean, there's another one in Norway that gets its carbon dioxide from a neighboring oil refinery and then turns all its algae into pellets to feed salmon in their fish farms. So that's Norway,
That's
oil and
Norway, yeah.
salmon. And Australia, I love it. Australia, there's a woman who's doing uh, you know, foods and cosmetics, and she gets all her carbon dioxide from the beer brewery next door.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, everybody has their own cultural identity.
No, they
But
do. It's really interesting to see the number of those kind of boutique aquaculture things that are coming up that are not growing them in the ocean, but they're kind of land-based.
and
Uh,
he's the scientist who studied here back when a few years ago when every smart kid in the world would go to college and then want to go to graduate school in the US. Not happening anymore, but he went to Yale and then he taught at Buffalo, and then it was, a couple of snowy winters, and he was back in Turkey
of course he was.
talking about how he says, well, I'm not saying there's no silver bullet. This biorefinery is not the solution to climate change, but if there are a few hundred of them around the world, they'll be part of the toolkit. And
Absolutely.
and
It
we have
counts.
to start thinking creatively. And a lot of young people, I mean, I'm less despairing than then frustrated because we know what the solutions are. It's
Mhm.
creating the political will to enact them. And lots of young people, I just spoke down at Alta Sea in the port of
Oh,
LA,
yeah.
which is a
Yeah.
blue hub, and there are these two big barges outside, and UCLA versus USD, and one of them is trying to suck carbon dioxide out of seawater and turn it into calcium carbonate for construction. The other one's to turn it into hydrogen fuel, and um, there was a series of wave turbines that are being attached to the seawalls in various ports around the world. I mean, the funny thing, again, frustrating, is we've done interviews with the AFL-CIO in Rhode Island because they've twice been ordered by this administration to drop tools because this administration is trying to destroy offshore wind.
Hmm.
But today, wind and solar are cheaper energy sources than any of the fossil fuels. And if you actually allow the free market to function at this point, we're well under the way for transition. When all the ships get bottled up, the tankers in the Strait of Hormuz, who's suffering the least is China and Spain because they're the most committed to electrification and renewable energy. And it's the potential. I mean, I don't know if it's true, but the FAO, the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization, thinks that in 50 years, seaweed will outperform potatoes as a food crop. But
Yes.
Well,
but
it have the advantage of growing fast and, generally speaking, high nutrition.
Hmm.
But we really have to be careful about how much of the ocean, the natural ocean, we displace
yeah,
because
you don't want big industrial farms offshore, but
No, not
but you
the,
can grow it anywhere.
yeah. I think the real key is, this kind of alignment with ports, and it's a great example at Alta Sea down at the Port of Los Angeles, because it is the Port of Los Angeles, and yet they have this real innovation center right adjacent to the port. And they are doing things with kelp. They have the kelp seed bank, and then they have the kelp that's being grown on the shore, uh,
Hmm.
which is sterile, and so that there's no chance of an escaping
until
uh,
nature finds a way to
till nature
break
finds
the
a way.
rules.
Sure.
I know it's interesting. The scientist who was running that kelp arc, he kept saying,
Mm.
um,
Heard that so
uh,
many times.
Yeah, I know.
Doesn't work out.
I know he wouldn't use the word sterile. He kept
Yeah.
saying like non-reproductive, and I'm going finally go. So you did see Jurassic Park, I'm getting.
Yeah.
Life will find a way.
But it's interesting that I think as aquaculture does become more responsible, that it can be focused on the species that naturally occur in that area, right? So you're kind of shifting. So if you're going to grow bull kelp, for example, you grow it where bull kelp occurs, and
Right.
you have that opportunity to maybe help restore some of the offshore systems and protect them so they can rebound.
And
But products are not being pulled right from those systems.
and often they're more valuable alive in the ocean
Hmm.
rather than extracted for commercial applications, even for food. We need to think of how do we how do we eat more responsibly right now? What we take from the sea is way out of um, it's out of whack. We're
Yeah.
taking top predators. We're
Well,
taking
and as you say, I
predators
mean,
that are on their way down, not up.
I remember being at the World's Fair in '64 and seeing this big clock that said, click to 3 billion people. And now
Mm.
it's 8 billion, and it's not done. I mean, it's the maldistribution of wealth is part of the problem because what are the biggest energy sucks right now? It's like crypto mines and AI, centers. And I don't remember anybody democratically raising their hand saying, "Oh, we need cryptocurrency," or "Oh, we need a data center." It's like I saw a cartoon recently of a deer in a beautiful glen, all water's connected and the deer's drinking and someone's going, "You greedy bastard, that water belongs to an AI center."
But
Oh,
David,
man.
one of the things I really love about the way you write in every one of your books, you make clear that it's one system. Everything connects. And it's the first time, literally, one of the good things about the 21st century, that we've been able to see how things connect. And we're finding new ways all the time, from the microbes to the carbon value of great whales, that we're absolutely integral to the system, but we're really greedy. We're displacing everybody else to support us. And
Yeah,
if
and a
we
lot of those decisions, though, are not being made by, you know, people
Ordinary people.
on the
Yeah.
streets and in the country. They're being, and like I say, the two biggest energy sucks right now are things that nobody decided for. It's being decided for us.
yeah,
Hmm.
And it's I mean, it's not like it's going to be easy with, if we do it democratically, but one thing I've seen in like 50 years of reporting is, that and a lot of countries I've gone to that have returned to democracy from authoritarianism, including hopefully ours in the next year or two.
mm,
Um, but democracy doesn't guarantee environmental sustainability, but it's a prerequisite. It doesn't happen under, authoritarian governments. It just doesn't.
no,
And so, these are the big challenges is, to protect the ocean, biodiversity, the climate, and protect our ability to make the decisions that are the right ones. When I wrote 50 Ways to Save the Ocean, it's because I got, as I'm sure you always do, these questions. Well, what can I do about, climate change or the collapse of marine wildlife? And the answer is everything we do every day affects the seas
Yeah.
around us. And again, the good
absolutely.
news is do right in terms of your energy choices, your food choices, your, engagement. And it turns out it does good for you, for your health, for your pocketbook, for your sense of purpose in life.
No,
Yeah, 100%. Because it really does. It's like force multiplication. And when you kind of lead by example like that, you get others engaged and inspired and they'll follow suit. They want to be part of the solution.
yep.
And and it's just, yeah, I mean, and again, it's the more it took us. So I'm based here in Richmond, California, which is a low income community. So when I moved here, they wanted to take the last 411-acre headland, natural headland, and turn it into a mega casino.
Oh,
Took
yeah.
us almost
Point
20
Melate.
years of grassroots campaigning, and now it's Point Melati Park. And we took 17 kids out there for all last summer, did trainings, water quality, got them kayaking, got them, out on our Queen of the Coast motor sailboat, and it's life transforming. We had one class earlier, one of the high school classes out there, and they were doing water quality testing, and an osprey came down and grabbed a big fish out of the water.
Oh,
And the
wow.
kids went ballistic. It was like, whoa.
Yeah, what just happened? And they're so cool because their ankles actually turn. They're so they can carry the fish this way, and so it's more aerodynamic for them. It's
Okay.
the only bird of prey that has those turning ankles. It's really cool.
Wow, they're amazing. And
Yeah.
So
I feel a
David,
little guilty because for the first 18 years of our campaign, we've got like 16 breeding pairs of ospreys there. So the osprey was like our mascot. And then our photographer, Jack, got a picture of a river otter grabbing a leopard seal right off the
Oh,
beach, thrashing it. And so Audie the otter sort of took us over the finish line, the
they're
river
no joke,
otter.
I'll tell you.
while you're taking kids out and getting them wet, you
Yeah.
should take some CEOs out too. And
Yeah, I would take them out. I'm not sure I'd bring them back.
Right? We get that question all the time is, if we take a CEO or a politician
Uh-huh.
down in a submersible, do we have like a, torpedo tube we should
one-way trip.
It's
one-way trip? But no, we bring them back. We just hope they, are changed in a positive way.
Yeah, and some do. I mean, there's good. We gave an award last year to Fisk, who's the CEO of SE Johnson, and he's,
Hmm.
Yes.
I mean, they have to be engaged, and like I say, the good news is we don't need the fossil fuel industry anymore because the growth is all in renewables,
That's
Hmm.
right.
and
It's
it's
crazy.
but they're like the whalers of the 1850s. How we're lighting the homes of the finest families, and we're lubricating the machine age, and if we without Leviathan, you're going to put 10,000 whalers out of work plus stave makers for the barrels and harpoonists, and And pretty soon we went from whale oil to rock oil, and now I've been out on BP platforms, deep drilling platforms. I was out on one about 20 years ago, and I the company boss name was actually Bubba. I say,
Of course it
Bubba,
was.
what happens if you get a blowout mile or two down? He goes, well, David, I guess we'll find out when it happens. And
Yeah.
fast forward another 10 years, I was flying over 100 dolphins and a humpback whale trapped in the BP oil
Wow.
disaster. It's like I respect his maritime history. I respect the whalers. I respect the roughnecks and roustabouts.
Yeah.
But the ones who are alive today can all transition and be linesmen and turbine technicians on offshore wind. They don't have to be putting their lives at risk in pulling up hydrocarbons.
Yeah,
Right.
no, it's like it's true. One of the things we've been working with Altasea is this sort of this BCAP program, starting in the community colleges, so that we bring kids along in their training for jobs. Maybe they're battery technicians, electronics technicians, but they're applicable across a number of sectors, so they're a little bit future-proofed, right? And there's skilled jobs that are being created, and those things can also occur with sustainable land-based aquaculture. They so it's just a matter of making a determined choice to go in a different, more nature positive direction.
And again, what people don't know, we just had our birthday book bash by the bay at the Pier House down in the Presidio, and Eric Jones came. He's the new superintendent of the Maritime Academy, the Cal Poly Maritime.
Oh, that merger was interesting. It'll be
And
interesting.
uh, and he, my friend and Rising Tide editor Charlie Land and his son Nick graduated from there. He's got a great job, as a mariner. And Eric was saying, people don't know. You go to college in the maritime sector, and you're going to graduate with a good paying job, at sea or in the harbors or in the ports. Uh,
Yeah, no,
and
it's true.
I think that the opportunities to participate in the blue economy is really where things should be going. I mean, up in Fort Bragg, they're trying to figure out, GP left, shut down its mill after you're saying there are no big trees to cut. It's like, yeah, you
Oh,
spent 100
imagine
years
that.
cutting them all. And the salmon got, and all the fishery. I was there in the 80s shooting for KQED at the height of the urchin fishery, which was massively overfished, as you know,
Mhm.
and then collapsed with the collapse of the kelp. And so they're really trying to figure out how do you have a blue economy that's works with the ocean instead of trying to
Damage it.
terminate the ocean.
Yeah, for sure. So what was the most surprising thing that you encountered during your kelp book journey?
Oh, I just think I just found some interesting stories and the like. I mean, the science types talk about Jim Estes went up to the Aleutians and discovered the trophic cascade, that the sea otters were like, essential to the kelp habitat. But I was much more interested in he originally went, the atomic otters. He originally
Oh my
went up
gosh.
there. He was hired by the Atomic Energy Commission when they were setting off nuclear bombs at Amchetka Island. And
Wow.
the third bomb was the largest underground explosion ever, 5 megatons. And
Whew.
they said, "Okay, Jim, tell it it's not going to hurt the otters, right?" Because the otters were almost extirpated. They were wiped out by the fur trade. They were coming back after 1900. There were about 6,000 around Amchitka. And this is why the Chinese don't do their nuclear testing in panda habitat. They blew it up and killed 1,000 otters.
Oh,
And this was right when Cousteau was doing his first special on otters, and the AEC realized they had a problem with these furry marine weasels. So they started using Air Force C-130s to relocate the otters out of
wow.
Amchitka to Southeast Alaska and Washington State and elsewhere. And the 602 atomic otters that were moved off Amchitka today have 30,000 descendants.
Wow. Incredible.
I think the sea otter is, of course, chapter 2 of the book is, otter things because, people still go, they may not get kelp, but they get like the essential predator of the kelp, that marine weasel, the largest of the weasel family, smallest of the marine mammals.
Yeah, no,
And
I mean, and they are really, their whole recovery is really intrinsically tied to healthy kelp because for years they've been saying, well, all those otters that are recovering in Monterey, they should naturally start to disperse north and south, but they're really constrained because they can't get past some of those bigger predators like, orcas or
Human.
shark,
sharks, yeah, that will eat them if they get outside the kelp band. So
yeah.
it's really constraining them. So they've been talking
But be
about,
fair, they'll just feel them. They're just doing a little bite feels, and then they
yeah,
realize
it's not like an
it just
attack. It's always a shark bite accident. It's not really an attack.
yeah, I mean, surfers and otters are like, "Ew, this is grizzly. This doesn't have any blubber on it." And surfers, it's generally okay because, it's cold water. We wear neoprene wetsuits, which act like pressure bandages. We don't bleed out so fast. Otters are so small. They're like, one bite and most, but if there's not something bigger and meaner than you are out there, it's not really a wilderness.
That's right.
We're blessed to live in a wilderness of, again, though, people think, oh yeah, ocean, white sharks. It's like, well, there's another vital predator out there. It's that adorable sea otter who's like, when when the blob, that last marine heat wave wiped out the sea stars, who were the last predators up north of the Golden Gate. Down in Monterey, they did a study and they found that the otters were just like, "Oh, you're not going to eat that?" They just
Yeah.
tripled up their
Like, ugh, I
consumption
want
of
that.
urchins, and 200 otters became 400 otters. It's,
Yeah. No, it's amazing. And we've even had the stories of some of the otters that are getting a little feisty, taking surfboards away from people and doing kind of sporty things like that. So we've got a
they're
couple of questions in the queue. So we're going to pop over to a couple of questions here. So Caroline says, I hope to read some of your books. Which was your favorite book to write and why? Are all your books written for the general public or do they target specific audiences?
they're all written for general public. I realize that, like with my latest, you know, turning a book on seaweed into a bestseller is going to be a challenge, but I think it's a
That's a
moment
big task.
when people are beginning to understand that there's this other beautiful, complex habitat and species out there. Um,
Hey, kelp forests just appeared on the cover of Time Magazine International about the Great Southern Kelp Forest of South Africa.
I know, and that's going to help
So it's
get the word out.
mainstream. You're right on. Your sense of timing could not be better.
No, it's true. And there's just so many, I don't know, things about kelp that, all the benefits that they have with increasing biodiversity, the carbon sequestration, their economic importance, the diving tourism that's tied to it, and then
The food, I mean,
and the
people,
food. Yeah.
I mean, and in the past, when I first moved to San Diego, people, Kelco just had big ships with the blades out front,
Oh, I remember
and
those.
they'd
It's like lawnmowers.
mow five, two ships could go 500 tons each a day, take off the first 3 or 4 feet. Now, 97% of all the kelp grown for food and algae is farmed. Uh,
Hmm.
a lot of it inland, a lot of it in China, about half of it. And people are trying, in Alaska and Maine, but what's happening in the U.S. is like a rounding error. 40 million tons a year, and we grow about 1,000 tons.
Yeah. Yeah, we
So
could do much more.
Yeah.
we could do more, and we could put it in. I mean, it's in Irish soda bread. Dulcie fed a lot of the Irish during the famine, and nori's valuable. It's kids today. They're eating a lot of. I went into Costco the other day, and the first thing I saw was a shelf of seaweed snacks.
The seaweed snacks. Yeah, those are great. All right. Jen, question for the group, voting for the ocean. There's a lot of talk about engaging young people in the US, but what's being done to reach out and engage middle-aged and older adults? The latter demographic still represents the highest percentage of people who turn out to vote.
Hmm. Find the kid inside of them.
Exactly. It's just, yeah. I mean, I think I try and write for everyone, and if you can keep that sense of engagement, like Sylvia says, the kid inside you. And that's one of the nice things about getting in the ocean. I mean,
It's
it's
fun.
like, and my friends, who I just stayed with in San Diego, they live right on the beach and their kids grew up feral, just like when we were kids. I mean, they
Right.
basically were out all day on the beach in the water, and they never got addicted to their phones because they were having too much fun um, by the beach.
Yeah. And I think that's true. It's just kind of getting people out into nature and really
Mhm.
having them engage. It will really influence what they do at the polls. If they, as Sylvia always says, if you don't know, you can't care, right?
And you have to vote the ocean this November. It's the only thing we can do. It's both good for democracy and it makes sense not to try and turn the ocean back into a gas station and a garbage dump again.
No, let's not do that. Okay, Michelle from San Diego. I've been praising and promoting kelp forests for years. When people would tell me how beautiful the coral reefs are, I'd give them a speech about the nutrient-rich kelp we have in San Diego. Not really a question, but that's all right. Uh,
I love for the book, Charlie and I went free diving in Point Loma kelp beds,
yeah, it's
maybe the
just so
most
beautiful.
studied kelp in the world.
And we've got one from Tom with the Oregon Kelp Alliance. We're
Ooh.
working on kelp forest restoration and using restorative kelp aquaculture to support the effort while exploring other opportunities. Let's see here. I'm interested in thoughts about how I can do a better job of integrating these efforts, working at the intersection of nature-based, market-based solutions.
I mean, there's all sorts with the urchins, for example. There are all sorts of efforts. I mean, a lot of it's just, smash and grab kind of, grab territory for the kelp to come back. But some people are like taking the largest of the purples, putting them out, feeding them up, and trying to grow their gonads back so that they could sell them for uni. I think that's a long shot. One woman's created urchinite, which is like countertops for the kitchen.
Mm.
I think in Santa Barbara, probably more practical. They're converting it into fertilizer for sheep farms,
Wow.
which, is like historically, we've always converted both urchins and beach rat. I mean, the word kelp comes from Scots who, after they over harvested the Caledonian forest, went to the beach and started getting soda ash out of burning beach kelp and turning it
Wow.
into, soap and glass and the like.
There's lots of different areas to explore. And Vivian, BFC managed to play an important role in the first executive order for national ocean policy back in 2010. With so much changing politically now, and not for the better, what would you like for us to know to continue to be hopeful?
Um, Check out the Peter Benchley Ocean Awards. There's all sorts of great stuff going on. Um, and and it almost always comes from the bottom up.
Yeah,
So
true.
engage, with your fellow citizens and there are a lot of people. I mean, just for example, the Trump administration is trolling California. They're never going to be drilling off of California. The places they want to lease, they're breaking the laws. They're in the middle of marine sanctuaries. There's a law on the books. So we have to, get back to being a law-abiding country and then create the laws that protect the resources that protect us all.
Yeah.
I just think it's um, I could almost read from the end of the book in terms of my attitude.
I
Could
think
I
it's taking hope and taking and then multiplying it into determination.
can I read just 2 pages from the book?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Executive decision, yes.
I got a yes.
We have one last question as well while you're
Okay,
pulling
well,
that
let's
up.
hear the question.
Uh, Jen says, David, can you please share more detail on your new kelp education learning project and how people and organizations can get involved?
Oh, absolutely. Go to info@bluefront.org or just contact me or Natasha. As I say, our plan at this point is we've got the book, we've got the film, we've got connections with people around the world, and we just want to strengthen the networks of all the groups that are doing good work in different parts of the world. We may get a van and try and start going, uh, to schools and providing film showings and books. But um, I mean, we're open at this point. We don't want to, step on anybody's flippers. There's incredible good work being done by the Kelp Forest Alliance out of Australia and all the groups, Sea Trees, and everybody here and the
Mhm.
nature. It's just what we did with Blue Vision Summits. We need to bring people together and have common strategies. And we should all support the Help Our Kelp bill that Jared Huffman from Northern California has introduced. Gives 5 million a year for initial restoration and research. The Korean Fishery Agency realizes it's a food security issue, so they invest $29 million a year, and they've restored 50,000 acres of wild kelp forest, and they plan to have 125,000 back by 2030. So it's
There's
about
hope.
scalability, and there is hope.
Hope. All right.
Okay, and I get to read the end,
Do
which
the reading.
the last chapters ends at your place with an interview with Sylvia, and uh, and then after you give your perhaps more optimistic than my perspective. I say Italian philosopher Antonio Gramsci once wrote about practical ways to move forward in this life: pessimism of the intellect, optimism of the will. And then he died in a fascist prison. Nonetheless, I believe that the seaweed rebels who've entangled their lives with macroalgae, immersing themselves in the science, restoration, protection, and digestion of the world's kelp forest, will in the end protect what they love, eat well, and die trying. We might even suggest that if we become stewards of the most basic building blocks of life, including algae and cyanobacteria, they may help us begin to heal the world. After all, like algae, we all come from salt water on both an individual and evolutionary basis. And as Isak Dinesen wrote, the cure for anything is salt water, sweat, tears, or the sea. So when you return to the source, when you explore the dark, mysterious, and enchanting forest of the sea, you're also returning home to reconnect to the wonder and scary sacred wildness that is both within you and around you, that can also be cold, wet, and awesome. It's like a large, fast moving shadow in the kelp when there's only 6 feet of visibility, and you think, hey, wait, what was that? It's life.
Well, thank you so much. And we are at the top of the hour. And before we go, Sylvia and I would like to say thank you again, David, and to our
Yes,
producers, the Ocean Elders, and to everyone out there in the diving community who keeps coming back and participating in these wonderful conversations. Water connects us all, and we are grateful to everyone. Remain curious.
we're grateful for David for writing all those books
Yes.
and for being who he is as a
And
true champion.
Gigi's going to
And
put a
I'm
summer
grateful
reading
for
list
knowing
here.
you too. You're some of my heroes.
All right, remain curious, spend time in nature, and we're going to be back in the middle of June. And until then, take care of the ocean.
As if your life depends on it, because it
It
does.
does. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.